Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Liam McKinnon, and today I will be talking about the best movies of 2018. To qualify for this list, I have examined the 25 films that I've seen this year, and I decided to look at the films that have no elements that betray the core story of the films. Even if a movie was highly expressive in its filmmaking, I still considered if every single element was used to its fullest advantage and didn't detract from the story. I have 8 films here today that I'm going to be talking about that I think qualify for being considered in the conversation of the best films of 2018. I'm not going to be discriminating films on this list based on genre. If a movie is a certain genre, I will take that into consideration for the kind of story it is trying to tell, but the elements that are a part of that story, I focus on its own story. Number 8 on this list is Paddington 2. Paddington 2 is a family film, and it is one of the best family films I have ever seen. It's an excellent sequel to its predecessor, Paddington 1, and what it does better than the original Paddington is it expands the generalized issue that the family has with Paddington from just being a stranger in their house to expanding their problems with their own personal issues, their own personal crises, and now they are exploring those throughout a very interesting and interwoven story of one that is focusing on greed, one that is focusing on the fear of being left behind and forgotten, and the fear of not being cool. This is a story where every single character is contributing, every single character who reoccurs and pops up has something to offer, whether it just be a pure, simple moment of heartwarming love towards another character, or whether it's to actually show a strong theme of courage or betrayal at the same time. Paddington 2 is the perfect family film for audiences young and old, and it should not be missed when you're trying to find a great movie for you and your family to watch together. Number 7 is Won't You Be My Neighbor. Won't You Be My Neighbor is a documentary that is specifically trying to take the Fred Rogers story and trying to add significance to our own period of time and the political climate that we are facing. However, I think that is the most important movie to see at this current moment. It is a film that shows how one man's influence on an entire generation affected everyone when it came to the newscast, when it came to public television, when it came to parents themselves. It offers a terrific insight on how much one man cares just about children and how much he wanted them to be educated in the darker side of the world, in the lighter side of the world, and didn't want people to discriminate because that was what their parents were doing. He wanted kids to be taught valuable lessons and to not simply be distracted by loud gunshots and the advertising of toys that would make you kill your enemies. He wanted kids to grow up to be thinking adults and to grow to love each other. But this movie is not simply trying to just allow for us to feel about how we're supposed to feel about the current events of our own time today. It is also trying to be a history take on Fred Rogers' life through the rise of his television series until his death in 2003. It is an excellent and insightful documentary, and I encourage you all to seek it out. Number 6 on this list is Roma. It tells the story of a young maid who is living with a family, and she is struggling with her own personal issues, be it from her relationships to trying to handle this family who is going through their own private issues as well. This film reminded me very much of Francois Truffaut's film, The 400 Blows, which I had seen in December of 2018, and this movie reminded me a lot of how Francois Truffaut kind of observed his film at a distance and allowed his kid to kind of be observed, but not necessarily feel too expressive, and he didn't want to necessarily fiddle around with his own life or his own remembrance of his history. But where Alfonso Cuarón's film Roma differs from The 400 Blows is that the characters' situations are being lived in, and they are not simply moments that feel like they are living moments of the past. Where at first we feel like we are patients in an observation room outside of a hospital, peeking into what the doctor is doing and what the characters are doing in the background. We're trying to pay attention, but we really aren't a part of it. Alfonso Cuarón involves us through his technique, involves us through his way of filming and capturing with all these characters, and it builds to some of the most beautiful moments of family connection that I've seen all year. Even though some people might feel that they are a little uninvolved in the story, it is still an excellent technical achievement nonetheless, and every single element of the story that is trying to convey these people's relationships and their struggles is being utilized. Roma is a movie that is available on Netflix, and it is a movie that everyone should absolutely see. And if it is you have a chance to see it in theaters, you should absolutely go for that chance. Number 5 on this list is Avengers Infinity War. Infinity War has had the very difficult task of trying to cap off a character, Thanos, that was introduced to us back in 2011 in the first Avengers, and it still has to stay true to the original Marvel characters that came out from 2008 in the first Iron Man. It has 10 years of baggage to deal with, and yet it still has stood out on top of almost every single other comic book film this year, and it is certainly a highlight of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Marvel has created an empathetical villain in Thanos, one who we don't necessarily support with his destruction of half the population, but we certainly understand it. And the characters don't feel like they are being cheated either. They have perfect chemistry with each other. The moments that they share, the banter that they have, the moments where they are fighting together feel earned. And what's really interesting is that the directors, the Russo brothers who created this film, figured out which characters need to interact with which characters to create the funniest moments, the most personal moments, the most emotional moments, and allow for the film to feel like it has a good pace with it. This is a very long movie and it could feel bogged down, and it never does. It flows through seamlessly. Although I have a personal issue with the end credit scene and how it dissipates the ending feeling of this movie, it still gives us a launching off point to continue this franchise. It is not the end result. This movie is not the cap off to the series and to the franchise. It is springboarding off for new ideas, but now they have something to overcome. Because now we are in one of those moments where we have read a comic book where the events have been so heavy, but we now see the to be continued moment, and we want to see what's going to happen next, and has created one of the best, if not the best, antagonists of the year. Number 4 is Into the Spider-Verse. Topping off of Marvel's Infinity War, Into the Spider-Verse has a very difficult task with trying to create a Spider-Man movie while we have had so many other Spider-Man movies. It is also dealing with an origin story, one that we've seen countless times. And yet the movie knows how to make fun of itself and make fun of this origin of Spider-Man while still making it feel fresh, literally 7 times over. The origin has gone through so many times, and yet the origin feels fresh, and we still care, we still laugh, and we still appreciate it. We understand the emotional issues of every single one of these characters, especially when it comes down to the Peter Parker that comes from another dimension. What really stands out, though, is the fact that this movie is able to handle the multiverse culture of the comic books and bring it to an attainable viewing audience. It can bring it to an audience that is not too familiar with comic books and still have them engaged and interested and laughing throughout without having to have any knowledge of what a universe or a multiverse really is. This movie also has a very relatable villain and an empathetical villain with the Kingpin, and it also showcases the strength and power of its villains while also being able to function throughout the entire movie. Every action feels powerful. Every moment in this movie does not cheat on itself. What is most impressive, of course, though, is the animation of this movie. It feels like a comic book, and yet it doesn't feel cheap. It doesn't feel like this animation is being created just to get that feeling of this is a comic book movie. It feels like it must exist. It provides great energy for the film. It provides an excellent color palette, and it also provides a rich background for anybody who's paying attention to examine further. Into the Spider-Verse is an excellent solo film, and it is one of the best comic book films I have ever seen personally, as well as objectively. Number 3 on this list is Annihilation. Annihilation is a film that was released also onto Netflix, and while unlike Roma, which has been getting a lot of critical acclaim, Annihilation has been kind of left in the dark a little bit. But Annihilation, more than any other film this year, left me personally with a feeling of intrigue and mystery, and with a lot more questions I want to explore. Looking away from the personal side, objectively, this is a very interesting sci-fi film. Similar to Denis Villeneuve's film Arrival, it offers questions of the sci-fi genre that we're still trying to find a way to express. But unlike Arrival, Annihilation has all of its characters being more than just simply expositional characters, such as the Jeremy Renner character who's trying to explain the plot as it continues, and there is no moment where time simply starts to expand and jump across. Like when the moment of the language is being learned, we just speed past that to get now to the next major event. Annihilation has a lot of mystery built up in the beginning, and now, as we experience it through the eyes of our predominantly female-led team, we start to examine what the mysteries of this shimmer are and what they could potentially mean for the world. But what is so interesting with Annihilation, what provides it above most of the other films this year, is just how brilliant the final ending is, and understanding exactly what the subtext of this world, what the subtext of the shimmer is. Asking questions during this film is starting to peel back a rainbow onion. You start to see all the layers in it, and you're fascinated by what you're seeing, and you're emotionally charged by it. The senses that you have are starting to work through constantly, and you start to notice things that you weren't considering before. There are still many questions I have with this movie personally, but looking back on it as a film, I know that every single element that was put in this movie was there for a reason. And aside from one of the best looking sets I have ever seen, this movie's art direction is incredible, and the production design is, without a doubt, some of the best, if not the best of the entire year. This movie has so much to offer to an audience who is looking for some kind of deeper level of intrigue in their science fiction films that they haven't really gotten for a while now. It's focusing on the relationship between environment, between individuals, between how we trust each other, how we fear each other, and it asks the question, what really is the more destructive force? Outside creation or us ourselves? Now, we get to number 2. And number 1. Or should I say, both number 1s. The best films of 2018 are a tie. The best films of the year that are tied are Hereditary and A Star is Born. I will say this with complete certainty. No two films were completely perfect when it came to every single element of them, both benefiting the story, being true to the characters, being true to the concepts and the themes that were being introduced, and also just providing an audience with the emotional connection that they needed throughout. Where Hereditary was an exercise in extreme horror, A Star is Born was an exercise in true character romance. No moment in these films feels wasted, feels tedious, feels thrown away. Hereditary is an excellent use of horror because it allows for us to feel on edge about the world. It is an excellent expression of taking away the agency that characters have. That idea that characters are in charge of their own destiny is stripped away from this film. And every moment makes you feel that. And yet you still care about them as people. They aren't just puppets in this story. They are actual people. Or are they? We don't know. We question these things because the filmmaking on display is perfectly set to make us feel that. To make us question what our characters are. If they are really in control or if they aren't. Every moment of complete agency they have, every choice they make is always under questioning, and we always wonder, where does the power lie? We might not like the fact that, oh, well, that doesn't make sense with the story I created in my head, but for the story Ari Aster was trying to create, it is absolutely perfect. And with A Star is Born, this movie has existed 3 other times before. It's been told 3 separate times. And yet the story still feels fresh and new because Bradley Cooper's ideas and his vision was focusing on these characters and their journey with each other, their experiences, their evolutions with each other. It was a movie that relied on trust. And you can see that the off-screen trust that was put into Bradley Cooper as a director is felt when Allie gives her on-screen trust to Jackson. It's a moment where even if the film jumps around from time to time, it's because it needs to allow these relationships to feel normal and natural. And they do. They aren't just jumping from place to place to hurry up the pacing of the movie. The choices made in this movie make it so every single moment, every single scene is utilized to its best ability. And the same is for Hereditary. And there's nothing I can say against these movies. The way that I would have to pick a best film out of these two is not by finding the best qualities of them, but it's by finding the worser qualities of them. And in both films, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to look at these movies and say, this is awful. This is a moment of pure, just terrible, terrible filmmaking, because there is no such thing as terrible filmmaking. There's no moment of that in either one of these movies. So I'm sorry if you feel that this is a betrayal of my own making of a best list. But to me, the best film of the year is a movie where every single element used follows that story, follows its characters, follows that core. And similar to the scene in Blade Runner 2049, we're taking the DNA and putting it over top of each other and seeing complete copy. I see the exact same film. Two perfect films. The only difference is genre. The only difference is what kind of story is being sought after. That doesn't mean that one is better than the other. What it means is they're both perfect. They're both matching with each other. They both deserve the position of being considered the best films of the year. All of these films, from Paddington 2 to Annihilation, all deserve the consideration for the best movies of 2018. They all fit that. There are some elements that put one above the other, but when it comes to Hereditary and A Star is Born, those elements match. There isn't a moment that feels better or worse from each other. The dinner scene from Hereditary, one of the best scene from 2018, is matched by the final cut in the final song from A Star is Born. And that is why they are tied for the best film of 2018. Thank you all so much for sitting down and listening to my considerations for the best films of 2018. I very much appreciate it. Like, subscribe, all that fun stuff. Please share with your friends. And as always, guys, take care and have a very good 2019.